Hello everyone. Today we are going to have a review of the compound complex sentence type, one of the 4 types of sentences in English. So I hope you still remember, and we are going to start with some checking questions. Question number 1. Please decide whether the following statement is true or false. A compound complex sentence has at least 2 dependent clauses. Well, it's false. I'll tell you the reason why later on. The second one, there are 2 or more independent clauses and 1 or more dependent clauses in a compound complex sentence. But this is true. Number 3, a compound complex sentence is made up of more than one sentence joined by subordinators, and at least one of those sentences is complex. This one is false. We won the game, but my uniform was muddy because it rained all the time. Is a compound complex sentence. Is it true or false? Well, it's false. Okay, so now let's look at the example. Tom cried because the ball hit him, and I apologized immediately. If you look at this sentence, you may realize that there are 3 clauses in this sentence. Tom cried is one independent clause. Because the ball hit him is a dependent clause, which begins with the subordinators because. I apologize immediately is another independent clause. So this is the perfect example of a compound complex sentence. Okay, now let's look at the definition. A compound complex sentence is a sentence having 2 or more coordinate independent clauses and 1 or more dependent clauses. Here is another example. Homecoming week is finally here, and all of the students are dressed up because they want to show their school spirit. Again, there are 3 clauses here. The first 2 clauses are independent. Homecoming week is finally here. All the students are dressed up, and these 2 independent clauses are joined by the coordinators and. And finally, because they want to show their school spirit is a dependent clause, which starts with the subordinators because. Another example, Mike is popular because he's good looking, but he's not very happy. Again, Mike is popular is one independent clause. Because he's good looking is a dependent clause. And he's not very happy is one independent clause. Now, let's look at some version of the compound complex sentence. The first version is compound complex sentence with adjective clause or adjective clauses. Here in the example, I would have purchased the cheese that you like, but it was expensive. Here we have 3 clauses. The first one, I would have purchased the cheese is independent. That you like is a dependent clause. And it was expensive is one independent clause. The dependent clause that you like is dependent and it modifies the noun, the cheese. And therefore, it acts as an adjective. So it is an adjective clause. The second version is a compound complex sentence with a noun clause or noun clauses. Let's look at another example. Jane explained how cookies are made, and we practiced her techniques at home. The first clause, Jane explained, is independent. The second clause, how cookies are made, is dependent. And the final clause, we practiced her techniques at home, is another independent clause. The dependent clause, how cookies are made, functions as the direct object of the verb explained and is a noun clause. Finally, we have the compound complex sentence with an adverb clause or adverb clauses. Here we have an example. We had a party because we had a lot of cookies and our guests ate the yummy treats. The first clause, we had a party, is independent. The second one, because we had a lot of cheese, is dependent clause. That begins with the subordinators because. And our guest ate the yummy treats is independent clause. The dependent clause, because we had a lot of cookies, functions as an adverb which tells the reason, and it is a compound complex sentence with an adverb clause. Now let's look at the ways to create a compound complex sentence. So as you may remember, a compound complex sentence must have at least two independent clauses. Therefore, you should begin with two independent clauses here. So here we have the two independent clauses. The team captain jumped for joy and the fan cheered. Step number 2, combine the two independent clauses to form a compound sentence. So usually there are three ways to combine the two independent clauses. Number 1 is to use the coordinators, or we have fanboys. Number 2 is to use a conjunctive adverbs. And number 3 is to use the semicolons. So here in this example, I use the coordinator and then we have the team captain jumped for joy and the fans cheer. Step number 3, now add a dependent clause to your compound sentence to create a compound complex sentence. And therefore we may have the team captain jumped for joy and the fans cheered because we won the state championship. Or when we won the state championship, the team captain jumped for joy and the fans cheered. Here you may have a list of the subordinators, coordinators, or conjunctive adverbs that you may refer to if you want to combine independent clause or clauses or dependent clauses to make up a compound complex sentence. Okay, it's time for practice. It's time to use your brain. Read the following sentences and identify whether each of them is the simple S, CD, or we have a compound, complex or CX, or compound complex, we have a CD and CX. Well, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to look at the sentence and decide on your own. Okay, now question number 1. Although it started to sleet, we decided to continue our soccer game. This sentence has two clauses. Although it started to sleet and we decided to continue our soccer game. If you remember, then you may realize that although it started to sleet is a dependent clause that acts as an adverb. And the clause we decided to continue our soccer game is independent, and therefore this sentence is complex. So you should write the word are the letters CX. Number 2, there were toys on the floor, under the table, and all about the room. This sentence has only one independent clause, and therefore it's a simple sentence. So the correct letters to fill in the blanks here is letter S. Number 3, Elle was enrolled in school full-time, and she worked 3 jobs to pay her tuition. There are 2 clauses here. Elle was enrolled in school full-time is independent. She worked 3 jobs to pay her tuition is another independent clause. And these 2 independent clauses are joined by the coordinators and. Therefore, this one is compound sentence or CD. Number 4, transportation came to a halt after the horrific car accident left 3 bodies on the road. So, the clause transportation came to a halt is independent. And the clause after the horrific car accident left 3 bodies on the road is dependent, which starts with the subordinators after and functions as an adverb which tells the time. So we have this sentence as a complex sentence. Now I'm going to give you some more minutes to look at questions from 5 to 7, and then I will be back in a couple of minutes. Okay. Now, number 5. Brooke and Shelby and I stayed up until 3 in the morning talking and laughing. This sentence has only one independent clause, and it is a simple sentence. Now, number 6. Unless Bob's work ethic changes, he will spend the rest of his life working for minimum wage at McDonald's. There are thousands of men like Bob who never earned a high school diploma. There are 4 clauses in this sentence. The first clause, unless Bob's work ethic changes, is dependent clause. The second one, he will spend the rest of his life working for minimum wage at McDonald's, is independent. The third one, there are thousands of men like Bob, is independent. And the final one, who never earned a high school diploma, is dependent clause. So here we have 2 independent clauses joined by a semicolon, and then 2 dependent clauses. Therefore, this one is a perfect example of a compound complex sentence. Number 7, music is her passion in life, and her friends say that she is a talented pianist. There are 3 clauses in this sentence. Music is her passion in life is independent. Her friends say that is independent. She is a talented pianist, or that she is a talented pianist is dependent. So here we have 2 independent clauses joined by a coordinators and a dependent clause. And this one is another compound complex sentence. Okay, so far we have had a review of the compound complex sentence, and I hope you have good fun. Thank you and goodbye.